It is Sunday, September 15th, 2019, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today, we are joined by one of our mentors, Ms. Frome, to lead a talk on being a champion for a culture of experimentation within your organization. Allow me to briefly explain the format. The Product Mentor program was stood up to help create better product people by pairing experienced product professionals with people looking to advance their product careers and capabilities. Each of the product mentors have many years of wonderful and diverse product experience, from B2B to B2C to hard products and even service products. We're also joined by the mentees in the current session. As you can see here, everyone wave in this view. Thank you. You can see them all around. Now we're going to do some brief introductions of each person that's in the session right now. I'm just going to start around my screen and work our way around. Just please limit it to just your name, your location, meaning what part of the world you're in. Don't forget to unmute yourself, by the way. Your role, and whether you're a mentor or a mentee. Let's start with Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Postelnak. I'm in Bloomington, Indiana. I'm a product mentor in this program, and I'm a product manager at Angie's List.
Thank you, Brian. Nis?
Hey, I'm Nis Frome, based in New York. I'm a mentor in the program. I'm a co-founder of a company called Alpha, and I'm the head of experimentation there, and I'll be speaking about experimentation shortly.
Yossi.
Hey, how's it going? Yossi here, coming to you from New York. I am a mentor as well in the Product Mentor Network, and I am the founder of a company called Upstack, as well as an advisor for a bunch of different startups, and happy to be here today, Sunday morning.
Daniel.
Hey, my name is Dan Darpansigi. I am in Toronto. I'm a product manager at a company called Moto Insight, and I'm a mentee in the program.
John?
Hi there, I am John, and I'm based in London, in the UK, and I'm the Chief Product Officer for a startup called Improvewell, and I am a mentor on the program.
Candice?
Hi, I'm Candice. Can you hear me?
Candice, I think we're having a little bit of issue with your audio.
I will try something later. So hi, I'm Candice. I'm a mentee in this program. I'm currently the head of product in a company called
Okay, just Candice, just so you know, your audio is sounds like you're in a box about 3 miles from your computer. For the next session, you could maybe look into that. That'd be great. If not, no worries. No worries. And I think we've covered all the people that are currently in our session right now. Lovely. Okay. Just a reminder. Please post your questions to the Q&A section at theproductmentor.com/live. As the questions come in, I will jump in and pass them to our mentor during the talk. We will not be doing questions at the end. We do questions live and in the middle. So don't be shy about posting questions into, again, theproductmentor.com/live. And I am Jordan Bergtraum, head of product at Equip ID, and I'll be your moderator for today's live stream. And now we're going to switch over to Nis. And Nis, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Hey, everyone. So being a champion for a culture of experimentation, I'm excited to give this talk. This is I think probably the 6th or 7th talk from the Product Mentor program, and they've been following kind of a pattern from more tactical to more of the organizational dynamics. And I'll talk a little bit about why I'm giving this talk. So I founded a company about 5 years ago called Alpha. Some of you may be familiar with it. We produce the podcast, This is Product Management, as well as the Medium publication, Product Management Insider. So Alpha is an on-demand insights platform. You can think of it as research for non-researchers. A lot of our users are, product teams, strategy teams, innovation teams. And what a lot of these teams are trying to do is drive a culture of experimentation within their organizations. So I get to see a lot of how they do that at some of the world's largest organizations, as well as run a team, kind of like an innovation lab at Alpha, but more focused on experimentation than innovation. And, I can talk about some of those differences. And so a team that's dedicated to driving experimentation at our customers as well as internally. And so I'm excited to kind of talk about the lessons learned that I've seen work at customers as well as internally. So like I said, kind of the patterns here, one of the most common things I've seen in this program, especially, I've had probably 6 to 10 mentees at this point, sometimes 2 or 2 during a session. And often, and I'm sure this will be familiar with a lot of the mentors here, your first conversation with your mentee, they have these challenges and you're talking to them about, their challenges are that, the customers really don't like the product, or that, it moves really slowly. It's a waterfall environment, something like that. Right. And when you start digging deeper and deeper, it might take a couple months, but really what it's about is that, the company does not have a culture of being customer focused. They don't have a culture of testing and learning. They don't have a culture of iteration. They might use the word agile and they might literally like break a spec into sprints, but they aren't typically customer focused. Right. And so what you often find is product managers who they go around and they talk about experimentation. They talk about agile and they talk about minimum viable products, but it falls on deaf ears. Right. And so I think what's really interesting is that this concept that you can't start with just that solution of experimentation. Like that doesn't mean anything within a really large organization, right? Not everyone in your company has read all the best practices and all the aspirational product management material. So when you go to them with it, it's like a different language. It's a total disconnect, right? And so you really have to take a step back and realize that it's counterintuitive. You don't start with experimentation. Really, you have to kind of break it down and look, there's the word champion, there's the word culture, and then there's the word experimentation. And actually, I'm going to spend most of this talk just going through some simple kind of principles and frameworks around how to be a champion in a culture. And then at the end, we'll talk about how you can apply experimentation to being a champion in that culture. But you could actually apply a lot of different terms to this, and I'll show a couple examples. So what I want to do now is break it down. And I want to begin with culture. What is culture? How do you change culture? And then we'll talk about what it means to be a champion. And then we'll get to experimentation. So really, like, what is culture? There's a lot of definitions. I'm not going to give like the definitive definition here. Just what I think is interesting is that culture is really the either implicit or explicit language in a company for how things get done and how people work together, right? It's how decisions are made, decisions like who should we hire, to like what types of snacks in the office. Like some companies like would only have healthy snacks because that's the sort of culture they have, which is more like, not necessarily dictating, but like nudging is probably the behavioral economics word that people use today. So to like, should we have dark patterns in our product that encourages behavior that is profitable and commercially viable for the company, but perhaps bad for users, right? For their health or for their, social media addiction or something like that, right? And so culture is really interesting because it accelerates everything, right? So when you have a strong culture, it helps people not have to reinvent the wheel every time they make a decision, because it's a set framework of principles for how decisions should be made, because typically those decisions would be incentivized either commercially through promotions and titles and promotions, or just generally speaking, raising your profile within the business. So the thing about culture is that it's also kind of a double-edged sword there, right? where, a really good culture can accelerate a whole bunch of good decisions that you don't have to reinvent the wheel on. But a bad culture can also accelerate a whole bunch of bad decisions, right? So culture is important though, because when it's good, it the famous quote from Peter Drucker, the management kind of scientist, is culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? If you think about it this way, and this is kind of a theme I talk about a lot, the world is moving really, really fast. Customer preferences and behaviors are changing really quickly. You can't just have 3 or 4 really smart people in a room making decisions for a whole organization, right? It just doesn't work. And so culture enables you to put principled guardrails, decision-making frameworks throughout the whole company to empower decentralized decision-making, right? It provides incentives and a framework for people closest to the problem to make the decisions about how the work should be done, how the product should be built, how the service should be offered, right? In the context of product management, a really strong product management culture, like I said, accelerates decision-making, mitigates risk throughout the product development process, perhaps identifies opportunities and new products and services, and really aligns expectations throughout the organization. I think what a lot of if you dig deep to the root of the problem, often within companies that your mentees work at, when they really start talking about the challenges they have, I think it really comes to this, is that they don't have a strong product management culture within their department, and they don't necessarily always have a customer-focused culture throughout the whole organization. So understanding that is where the problem kind of begins is really helpful to understand how to solve it, right? It's often not that your mentee is just a really bad product manager. That's like very rarely the case. Usually what there's a disconnect between all the things they're trying to do and all the things that their company incentivizes doing. And that's the problem. So how is culture impacted? Really in 3 ways, and there's some good news to this. So the first way is top down, CEO led. I think that that is probably the easiest. One of the most recent examples would be the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, who really came in and shifted the company from what he calls like a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture. Had management read new books, get training on new theories, create kind of this learning mindset. You've seen the same thing at Walmart, where they now have, aspire to be a learning organization where people learn from each other, and you're not necessarily incentivized to know things, but to figure out how to learn things, right? And I would say that's the most straightforward, because the CEO has a lot of power to change incentives, change management, change leadership, and drive that sort of change. The most common historically is probably the second, which is outside in, management consultants coming in and reorging your company to kind of change and impact the culture. A lot of studies show, there was a recent one in HBR, that like these are largely ineffective. Less than 1/3 have any positive impact at all, and it's also the most expensive. So thankfully, I think we're seeing a lot of organizations shift away from that. And what I really think the trend here and the direction that the industry is going is bottom up, which is champions, individual contributors championing a new culture and a new path to success. I think we're seeing that for a variety of reasons. First, because we have a really dynamic kind of mission-driven workforce today, where people care about the work they're doing and the impact they have on the market in ways that they haven't necessarily in the past. It goes beyond kind of profit, and you're seeing this, from the recent CEO roundtable announcement to the kind of emergence of B Corps, but people really caring about having a mission-driven way of working in a mission-driven organization. And so I think companies have no choice but to enable champions of new cultures. But also, I think you're just seeing, again, this go back to what I was talking about before, where the world is moving really quick and decentralized organizations are winning. So companies that don't enable this to happen are literally just going out of business. And so I think this is a really exciting trend, where the future of how culture will be impacted and shaped will be at the individual contributor and the champion level, and not necessarily at the CEO or the management consultant level. So let's talk. So we've talked a little bit about culture and how culture is probably the root of problems and opportunities, and how the trend is that they can be changed by champions. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about like who is a champion. So at a high level, you've probably kind of gathered this by now, but a champion is really an agent of change. operating in a perceivably forward-thinking way, regardless of the culture they have. Like that, a champion is not someone who is just a rah drinking the Kool-Aid for the culture the company has. That's someone drinking the Kool-Aid. This is someone trying to serve a new Kool-Aid. One of my favorite quotes in like kind of the innovation space is from the founder of Bonobos, the fashion brand that got acquired by Walmart probably a few years ago. Founder Andy Dunn said, "The history of innovation is the story of ideas that seemed dumb at the time." So this is really a pertinent quote here. Like a champion in an organization is actually kind of going against, is more of a contrarian, right? Like the things they're saying go against the grain, are not incentivized, are not encouraged, not necessarily discouraged, but just not like everyone's first reaction is like, well, that sounds off, right? And so of course it could be off, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But that's what a champion often looks like. And like I said, I think it's an increasingly common source of impact for company cultures. I think champions are going to be the driving force. Some examples, just I said before that it's not just product management. Like you can apply being a champion and impacting the culture to a lot of things. Some of the most recent, I think in the last 5 to 10 years, are remote working, being a champion to drive a culture of remote working, of letting people work from home, having better work-life balance, hiring really great talent in cities that you don't have an office. Diversity and sensitivity, I think that's a huge trend in the workplace. Agile development, obviously correlated to product management, but really started in the engineering community. And so I think, I'm sure there's 50 other examples you could give where champions within their organization the last 5 to 10 years really shaped the company's culture around these sort of topics. So it's not just around experimentation. That's a word we'll get to soon. But I think what you're seeing is a lot of, if you want to have be a champion of a culture of experimentation, you have to understand how to impact culture and how to be a champion. So why are champions important? Again, I think this will follow kind of in an expected format here. I've kind of already answered a lot of this. So decentralized decision-making is leading to cultures that are continually open to change and improvement. I think a lot of companies today are ripe for champions to come in and seize different opportunities and trends and really kind of seed the ground for those trends to take place and for those kind of new ways of working to take place. That being said, champions often compete with each other and the status quo over narratives for the future. I said this before, cultures can be positive cultures as well as negative cultures. It's a double-edged sword, right? They make decision-making and they accelerate workflows a lot. They make decision-making easier. So a great culture makes great decision-making easier, but a bad culture makes bad decision-making easier as well. And so I think kind of like one of the examples I give here of like misguided champions and misguided culture would probably be like GE, where, they thought they were taking the right concepts from the minimum viable product, but instead of focusing on validated learning, they focus on like a strict adherence to the book and shipping kind of half-baked products, which product managers today know is not the point of minimum viable products. The point is validated learning and iteration, not just following a strict adherence to the book. And I think you can see the results today is that their business is shrinking, that they really haven't validated new opportunities, and they've lost a lot of really great talent in the process as well. So there's some of the examples where like a misguided champion can also have like an immense impact on a company, but in a very negative way. So it's a vector that works in either direction. So in the context of product management, though, I think a product management champion, they focus on new objectives, not shipping things, but improving customer satisfaction, or whether it's NPS or whether it's customer feedback or customer outcomes that you're improving, right? Product management champions focus on better workflows, whether it's agile or experimentation or iteration. And they focus on the mindsets that are needed throughout the product organization, probably throughout the company as well, in order to better validate customer problems and solutions. So whether it's implementing problem discovery, solution discovery, again, mitigating risk and capitalizing on growth opportunities. I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but that's kind of the concepts here is that, a champion will come in and say, the culture we have is great, and it's gotten us to where we are today. But if we want to get to where we need to go in the next 5 and 10 years, we actually need a new culture, right? We need to change the way we think about building products, right? And so how do they do that? How do they make that impact? So the first is that champions relentlessly sell, right? They are always selling. They're salespeople. Again, whether it's experimentation, whether it's product management, like champions sell And I think kind of the two most common ways they sell, I think, are by focusing on they tell stories, but either aspirational stories or stories of desperation. So what I often see from champions that I've worked with or seen impact their organizations through this program and at Alpha is there's champions that focus on the stories of, well, this is how Amazon did it, this is how Netflix did it, right? They really focus on companies that everyone kind of recognizes that are innovators and are really successful, and they can literally point to those. I think one that's really interesting. I think Amazon, Netflix, companies like that, Bridgewater Associates, they literally expose the culture and the decision making frameworks they have there. Like, they don't hide what they think makes them successful. So one of the ones I think is interesting at Netflix is that the CEO kind of measures himself on how few decisions he can make quarter over quarter, and how often he's surprised by new innovations from the company. I think that's so interesting in a way to think about culture and decentralized decision making, is that CEOs of the future thinking of how few decisions they make due to the culture that they've enabled, right? And I think that's a really interesting trend that is going to increase over time. So champions are focusing on that sort of aspiration, and then they're also focusing on the desperation. They'll point to examples like of Netflix and of companies that perhaps have lost their way, and show what those companies did as well of not being customer focused. And so I think both ways, of telling stories, I think aspirational is more exciting and uplifting, but stories of desperation also can be effective. Champions also eat their own dog food, no matter the cost or taste. Like, again, being a champion in organizations, also being a contrarian, it's the same thing, right? And so they are often doing things that are not incentivized. They might miss out on promotions because they believe so fundamentally in this new way of working, and they're going against the grain. And so I think they really, really adhere to it even when it looks crazy. And I think they also are really good at, once they have success, they showcase the hell out of it. So like, kind of a heuristic I would have for a champion is that they are going and publishing articles and speaking at conferences about this new way of working in their organization, even when their PR team is like, you can't do that. Like, if they are not getting approval to do things, that's a good heuristic that they're being a champion for something, right? Because their PR team would be like, that's not the way we work here. And the champion's like, well, it will be in the future. And so I think what's interesting though is they don't just showcase success, they connect success to the underlying mechanics, to this new way of working. So they'll, like, anyone in an organization can say we had a success because we're doing things the way we do things. But a champion says we had success because we did things a new way. They connect the dots there, because that's what makes it, contagious and viral within a large organization, is people saying that person's having success and it's because of X. And I want to try doing X. X sounds exciting. It makes sense, or it's starting to make sense. I've read about that in a book. I've seen it in a video. I've seen it in the Product Mentor program, right? Like, I want to do that because it's connected, right? They're connecting success to this new way of working. Yeah.
This, we do have a question for you. And the question is, does a champion need to be a subject matter expert in the area they are trying to make change?
I definitely, I think so. I think, again, I don't want to underplay how much a champion is a contrarian in their organization, and you're going to be challenged all the time. Like, you are literally, like, you're an internal disruptor to the culture, right? And so you're going to be challenged from a narrative standpoint. Like, people are going to ask you, where else has this worked? If your only examples is like a book and a story from 20 years ago, like, that's not a strong way to tell it. You're going to ask, what's the ROI? And then even once you get past that stage, you're going to ask, well, how does it work? How do we implement it here? Have you thought about X? Have you thought about Y? Have you thought, one of the things you'll get is, what about our existing customers? Like, we need to focus on them. What about our CEO, who is like our president in chief, our head of product in chief, who makes all the decisions about what products to build? And those are really common things you're going to hear, right? And so you really do need to be an expert to be able to navigate a large organization, all the kind of, you're swimming upstream really. So actually, one other point I want to make here is that champions are often MacGyvering their way. Well, I'll get to that around experimentation. So let's talk about experimentation, which is the probably the most well understood concept here. But like I said before, probably the least important if you want to make an impact on a culture, right? And you want to drive a culture of experimentation. Like being an expert on experimentation only matters after you understand the organizational dynamics of what your culture is, how to change it, and how to be a champion, right? So experimentation, I think I'm not going to go too deep on. I think everyone here probably understands, right? It's the underlying mechanic for data-driven decision-making at scale, right? Experimentation is really a set of techniques. There's countless examples. They're listed out in blog posts, and I'm sure they're talked about in other talks here and all over the place. But it's really a set of techniques that closes the gap between what you perceive a customer problem and solution is and their genuine problem and solution. It is techniques and a process for saying, for basically kind of deciding whether something is or isn't a problem, and whether something you're proposing is or isn't a solution, and whether maybe another solution or another problem should be prioritized, right? Examples, again, you're probably all familiar with countless. I provide an example here that I think is probably one of the best episodes from our podcast. It's an innovation design strategist. His name is Ben Singer. He works at Humana. He really drives a culture of experimentation there. I encourage everyone to kind of listen to this interview. It's really great. He talks about the tools and the techniques and the process and the people, and how he goes about kind of shifting teams from, making opinion-based product development decisions to more customer-focused and data-driven through experimentation, right? And so I think probably all of you are really familiar with this. And if you take away anything from this talk, it's really that being an expert on experimentation is not the key to driving experimentation in your company. You, again, like I just answered, you need to have expertise, but most people here are probably way more of experts on experimentation than anyone within your organization, right? The issue is not being an expert on experimentation. The issue is being an expert on driving culture change. So again, why is experimentation important? I think this is probably at this point beating a dead horse for everyone on this call, but experimentation shifts value from consensus building and high quality decision making to instead speed to insight and high velocity decision making. These are kind of terms from Amazon where, Jeff Bezos talks a lot about how in large organizations, people make decisions in the same way, whether those are reversible or irreversible decisions. And an irreversible decision, historically was, 90% of decisions were irreversible. Where should we build the factory? What color should we make the car? You can't just change that the next day. Like, you kind of have to make that decision and stick with it for some period of time. But today, product development often doesn't work that way. Very few decisions are irreversible. Most decisions can be iterated on. And yet most companies still make decisions in the same way. And so what they've done at Amazon is been explicit about, hey, if we are making a reversible decision, we can make a high velocity decision and then just change course correct when we learn that it is or it isn't the right decision, right? And so they focused on high velocity decision making over high quality decision making, and they've said that's one of kind of the keys to success there. And I think a lot of other companies have followed suit. I think a lot of companies see that experimentation at scale is actually a sustainable competitive advantage, that you don't need to have, your typical moats of, patents and intellectual property or geographical advantages, but actually just being customer focused is a sustainable key to continuous innovation. And it's a sustainable competitive advantage in any industry. And then it's important because product managers can be more customer centric and achieve better outcomes, and also avoid worse outcomes more reliably with experimentation. Again, I think most of you in here would agree, or probably in this program because you already agree with this, but your coworkers don't. So how do champions experiment? This is really what's important here. And this is a point I was making before. It's not pretty, right? Eating their own dog food is not pretty at first. It's not incentivized. It's not encouraged. It looks crazy to everyone. They're often MacGyvering their way toward experimentation. And this is a key point because all the books you read rarely make this point, right? In the books, the product managers at Google or Twitter or Amazon, they have a lot of resources. Their entire team is like really well trained. They're like all top 1% in what they're doing. And you have resources and you have autonomy. And then it's like, well, just, experiment instead of not experimenting. You're like, great, but that's not how my company works, right? My company doesn't have resources. This isn't encouraged. I'm like, my boss is going to say no. My boss's boss is going to say no. My coworker's boss is going to say no, right? And so what I see in companies where there's someone really championing it is crazy sort of approaches. They are using their personal email to sign up for tools and maybe a personal credit card for some kind of low transactional tools. I see that all the time. They are, literally getting out of the office and just going and talking to people to get feedback. And often they don't have access to customers. So they're finding workaround ways to get access to lookalike customers, people who could be customers, people, future customers and prospects. And I think they're doing a lot of manual workflows. They're using, spreadsheets and docs instead of kind of software tools to do it, right? And so those, if you look for like a heuristic here on MacGyvering, like those are sort of the heuristics to look for. They are not just, day one investing in a $500,000 experimentation program within their organization, right? That comes after they've MacGyvered their way toward experimentation, kind of proven the value, seeded the ground a little bit with a kind of core group of followers who are like, yeah, we're starting to see success connected to this new way of working. And now we're ready to make a bigger investment. That's not where it starts though. That's already step 3 and 4, right? And so what I see really early on with champions who experiment is it looks ugly. It's really kind of MacGyvering their approach, right? Champions for experimentation become a unique or exclusive source of customer market insights. That's something I see in this program a lot, is that they begin introducing insights in some form or fashion within their organization. Maybe it's just an email they send every month with some things we've learned from kind of like our own digging and our own research, right? And people in the organization are like, wow, that's really novel, or that actually helps me impact our programs on the marketing side or on the sales side or on the customer success side, right? Those are some of the things you see. And the heuristic there is, something I work on with my mentees is begin sending that email, being that voice of the customer, being a source of customer market insights. And then 1 month, don't send the email and see how many people ask you like, hey, where'd that email go? Right? That's how you know you're starting to make an impact. You're starting to get people hooked on experimentation, this new way of working. And again, champions for experimentation connect those techniques to outcomes, like I said, and they connect those outcomes to culture change, right? And that's whether you're talking about experimentation or diversity or remote work or agile development or whatever it is. Experimentation is really just the variable here. The mechanics is being a champion and impacting the culture. So really to break it down, to have success, you have to break it down and then build it back up. So you have to start with the culture, what your culture is, where you want it to go, and really map it that way. Figure out what it takes to be a champion in your company. Who are the other people who are going to be the early followers? Who are going to be the late followers? You are disrupting your own company's culture. And then the variable is experimentation. So yes, you have to be an expert on experimentation. You have to know how to experiment. I would bet that most people in here are already most of the way there on that last bullet point. The challenge is getting there on the first 2 bullet points. Some common mistakes I see a lot is experiments. I see a lot. People focus on validation, right? They focus on experiments that are going to figure out new opportunities. Most experiments do the opposite, right? The point of experimentation is also to eliminate waste, right? And so set those expectations that experiments often are very cost-effective ways to eliminate waste and to not build products, features, and services. Like the first idea your executive has is very unlikely to be the best possible thing you should be working on, right? It's probably a 99% chance that it's not the best thing, right? And so setting expectations around invalidating ideas can be really difficult. If you don't set that expectation beforehand, you're just a naysayer. Like you're just that person who goes around saying that won't work, that won't work, that won't work, right? And that's fine because that's what experimentation is. But you have to set the expectation that that's what experimentation is. The second thing I see is just kind of like this blindly following. I think we saw a lot of that at GE and some other organizations where it's like the book says to do this. Like, all right, well, the book doesn't provide all the context for how to apply experimentation in every organization, right? So like use your head, look at what's worked for your company in the past, look what hasn't. right? And contextualize and adapt different best practices to your organization. Like, you have to use your head for this. And one of the most common mistakes that I see is people just pointing to like a chapter in a book. And like, that's just not how it works. It's not how anything's going to work. It's also not a really strong and compelling way to drive change. The third, I can't stress this enough. It doesn't have to scale. It doesn't have to look pretty. Like, the goal is not immediately to experiment at scale. The goal is to get people bought into experimentation. Getting people bought into experimentation will down the line let you scale experimentation, but you can't come in day one and be like, everyone has to run an experiment. I think that's what like GE, a lot of that did was just like, everyone's going to be a product manager. Everyone's going to work in a lean way. But like, you have to figure out what it looks like in your organization works at a micro level, and then begin scaling it. Right. And then last is jargon and buzzwords actually do work, especially the larger organization, the more powerful buzzwords and jargon. And so having terms and phrases, as kind of silly as it can seem, is really important. So one of the mistakes that I see people make is like, they avoid jargon and they avoid buzzwords. And I get that, but they also do work in a big organization. Having like, innovation days and hackathons and, whatever terms, like minimum viable product took off because it's a really good buzzword. The concepts behind it had existed for 2 decades before, if not much, much longer, right? But like, even the very identical concepts had existed for a long time, but just didn't have that sort of jargon and buzzwords. And so I think that's where you see how powerful those buzzwords can be. They'll get misused. You'll see them get misused. You'll see them get misunderstood, but like, you'll have people talking your language, and that's kind of the start a lot of the time. I've got some recommended reading on all this. I think the deck will be shared. I've got recommended reading on what a company culture is, how to change it, around behavior change, and then some principles for experimentation. So thanks everyone for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions. That's my talk, and enjoy the rest of Sunday otherwise.
Thank you, Nis. That was fantastic. Again, on being a champion for a culture of experimentation within your organization. As always, the presentation will also be posted to our SlideShare channel. And a big thank you from me, Jordan Bertram, Head of Product at EquipID, and to everyone who joined today's session and the Product Mentor. And don't forget, if you're interested in being a mentor like Nis Frome, visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today.